Hey mates, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American who is learning to live down under here in beautiful Sydney, Australia. Moving to Australia, I knew that there were a lot of differences between American and Australian cultures, even though they seem similar. Some of the things do still catch me up, and one of the times this happens is when I go grocery shopping. There are some names that are completely different over here in Australia than what they are in America. So I wanted to share a list of 20 different names, brands, products, food stuff basically, that I've seen over in the grocery stores over here in Australia that is completely different than what I've seen in America. So if you want to see what that list is, stay tuned. First on the list is rocket, and rocket is what we call arugula over in the States. When I first heard about like rocket lettuce, I had no idea what people were talking about, saying that they put rocket in salads, they put rocket on sandwiches, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a totally like maybe brand new type of lettuce, something that we can't really have imported over in the States. And then when I saw that it was just arugula, I don't know why the name difference, I don't know where it came from, I don't know why it's called rocket here and arugula over in the States, but that's what it is. So I found out that rocket lettuce over here in Australia is just what we call arugula over in the States. So the second one that's caught me up a little bit when I'm in the produce aisle is capsicum. Capsicum is not a word you ever hear over in the States. Instead of hearing capsicum, what you'll hear is peppers or bell peppers. So stuffed peppers, peppered steak and rice, sausage and peppers. We don't call it capsicum over in the States, it is just peppers. Third one I mentioned in a video before, and that is biscuits. Biscuits over here in Australia are what we typically call cookies over in the States. And you will see the word cookies over here in Australia once in a while. It typically refers to something like a chocolate chip cookie, where it's kind of like a generic, almost all run together sort of thing. So you will see the word cookies over here in Australia, but you will more often than not see the word biscuit, which a couple of my viewers and subscribers have pointed out in some of the comments below that even though American biscuits are very different from Australian biscuits, Australia does have something kind of similar, and that is scones or scones. I'm not sure how you guys say it with the like short O or the long O. I'm going to say scones because that is how I said it growing up in the States, and I'm still not entirely sure which it is, so if I'm saying it wrong, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for like the support that you guys have given me over the last couple weeks, like letting me know how things are pronounced and how to say things properly over here. So scones over here in Australia are what we call biscuits over in the States. So those big, floury, fluffy kind of biscuits that typically go with savory meals are scones over here in Australia. And there are sweet scones as well, which is what we're used to over in the States. You'll see scones once in a while in the States, but typically they're like orange or lemon or cranberry or vanilla. Once in a while you'll see like chocolate scones. So they're typically a sweet treat, a sweet dessert over in the States. And in place of savory scones, we actually have biscuits over in the States. So when you see scones or scones over here in Australia, just know that they come in both sweet and savory form, because you're not going to find traditional American biscuits on packaging. This next one in the produce section, I had to laugh when I first heard of it because it does make sense, but it's just so weird to hear, and that is rock melon. I mean, something about just calling it a rock melon seems so weird and bizarre to me, but it does make sense because it does kind of look like a rock and it's a melon. So rock melon over here in Australia is what we call cantaloupe over in America, and whether it's in America or Australia, I still can't stand it. I'm not a cantaloupe fan at all, so for me, I will not be purchasing cantaloupe or rock melon anytime soon, but if you are a fan of it, and you happen to be over here in Australia, look for rock melon. So this next one is also pretty well known, and it's once in a while you can find it over here in Australia. I think I found like one brand that actually sells it, at least by this name, and that is cheddar cheese. Cheddar cheese over in the States comes in a bunch of like colors and varieties and whatnot, and instead of it being cheddar cheese over here in Australia, it's typically called tasty cheese. And it does have a very similar taste, similar consistency. You're not going to find like orange cheeses over here in Australia the same way, the same like frequency that you do over in the States. Cheese over here is white, sometimes like a really creamy yellow color, but you're not really going to find orange cheese over here in Australia. So if you're looking for cheddar cheese over in Australia, look for Chasty cheese, and don't look for the giant bricks of orange cheese over here in Australia because you're probably not going to be able to find it, at least not easily. Now this next one isn't really different, it's just pronounced different, and hearing it the first couple times it was a little bit of a head scratcher because it just sounds weird to my American ears, and that is herbs, as we call them over in the States. While over here in Australia they do pronounce the H, so it is herbs. It's still kind of so weird to say it with that H sound in it, herb, but like that's just the way it's pronounced over here in Australia. So if somebody is talking about how they need to pick up some herbs over in the produce section, they're just talking about what we call herbs over in the States. This one isn't all that common, at least it wasn't that common with the type of foods that I cooked back home, and that is Swiss chard, and that is something that you can find over in the States in a lot of grocery stores. Sometimes it's seasonal, it's not always the easiest to find, and over here in Australia it's not called Swiss chard, it's actually called silver beet. I've never had a recipe that actually called for either of these ingredients, but I did see it the other day when I was walking around the grocery store. So if you are looking for Swiss chard for a recipe over here in Australia, you're going to need silver beet. So if you're somebody who loves to make burger patties homemade, who loves tacos, who loves anything that involves ground meat, you are not going to find ground beef, ground turkey, ground chicken. Instead, you are going to find what they call mince over here in Australia. So minced beef, minced turkey, mixed chicken. So it's basically the same idea. You mince up the meat, you ground up the meat. Same idea, just a slightly different name. So if you are looking for ground beef over here in Australia, you are going to look for mince. So the next one I only ever really use or eat when I'm making tiramisu, and that is ladyfingers. Ladyfingers over in the States are those typically long, often crispy, slightly dried out biscuits that when you put them in just a little bit of liquid, soaks it up right away, which is the reason it is the phenomenal base of a tiramisu. But you are not going to find them called ladyfingers over here in Australia. Instead, they are sponge fingers. And from what I've seen, they're slightly bigger than the ladyfingers over in the States. At least this might just vary by brand. Maybe it's the difference between the countries. I can't really say for sure. But if you're trying to make a tiramisu or if you want ladyfingers for any recipe, you are going to need to pick up sponge fingers over here in Australia. So this word I actually knew already because of the Great British Bake Off, and that is profiteroles or profiteroles. I'm not entirely sure how it's said. I think it's profiteroles going off of the spelling of it, but profiteroles over here in Australia are what we call cream puffs over in the States. So you can find profiteroles and cream puffs over here in Australia. You're just not going to find them under the name cream puff. It is going to be profiterole. One that we have over in the States, and I'm just not used to hearing it termed this way, is long life milk. And that is any sort of soy milk, almond milk, coconut milk, banana milk, anything that you find in cartons on the shelves rather than in the dairy section of the grocery store. And we do have all of these products in the States, but we don't call it long life milk. We typically will just say we need almond milk, we need soy milk, and we don't necessarily need to pick up the ones that are on the shelves. Like, I don't know why we don't really differentiate. It's just one of those things where somehow we know, or at least we know which brand to pick up. So we don't say we need soy milk that's long life milk or almond milk that's from the dairy section. Somehow, I guess, just from grocery shopping, we know which one to pick up. So long life milk is a term that is kind of new to me and something I never heard over in the States and is new to me now that I'm here in Australia. Next one is Super Dupers, and even though we don't have Super Dupers exactly in the States, we do have something very similar, and that is what we typically call ice blocks over in the States. Some people have also called them freeze pops, but I used to call them ice blocks as a kid. So Super Dupers over here is a brand name for those long icy, like not quite popsicles, like those ice blocks, those freeze pops over in the States. So this is great in summer. You will see these all over the place, especially now that it is getting much warmer over here in Australia. So if somebody is talking about a Super Duper, they're talking about an ice block or a freeze pop. This one has been a little confusing for me because I haven't figured out exactly what they're called here compared to what they're called in the States. Like, it seems to be slightly different depending on who I talk to. But over here, icy poles are also called ice blocks, which we call popsicles over in the States.
Everyone does this with popsicles, but they may not realize what it means. It has nothing to do with an ice cream truck on a hot summer day, or the flavor, or the color. It's a ritual. You take it, break it, share it, and love it.
So Popsicle is an actual brand name that became really, really popular back in like the 50s and 60s. So we just generically call them popsicles when we're talking about these types of like frozen desserts, frozen treats. From what I've seen, Icy Pole is kind of the same thing, where there are some where it seems like it's a brand name, but some people also call them ice blocks as well. So you're not going to find somebody who typically says that they're looking for a popsicle over here in Australia. You might hear them say ice block or an icy pole. Let me know down below if you guys are from Australia which you guys use for these types of products, because I could not get a straight answer from some people as to exactly what these are called. This next one is pretty well known, but that is lollies. And lollies over here in Australia are what we call candy over in the States. But here's the slight caveat with that. Candy in the States also is like this umbrella that refers to chocolate as well, whereas lollies over here in Australia doesn't. Like, lollies and chocolate are two completely separate things. Lollies are like the fruity candies, gummy candies, chewy candies, whereas chocolate is anything with chocolate. So in America, somebody's going to talk about candy, they could talk about chocolates, they could talk about gummy treats, they could be talking about bubble gum or something like that. Over here in Australia, there is a difference between them, so lollies is pretty similar to what we call candy over in the States. And the next one, and I give Mark a hard time about this one all the time, is jelly versus Jello. So I know that Jello is the brand name of it, and we call it Jello over in the States. We don't call it gelatin, we don't call it jelly like you guys do over here. It is just Jello to us over in the States. Here you will find it called jelly. A pretty common brand that I've seen so far is Airplane. I haven't actually made any of it over here yet. It's pretty much the exact same process as making Jello at home. It's the exact same type of product. There are some different flavors. I did see that you guys have a wine one over here, which I'm kind of dying to try. So if somebody is talking about jelly over here in Australia, they are talking about what we call Jello over in the States. And to flip that over to make things just a little bit more complicated, because things are just similar but slightly different over here, jelly over in the States is what they call jam over here in Australia. Now this one gets me all the time. Like, I don't know why, this is just one of those words, one of those things that keeps tripping me up over and over and over again, and that is Napolitana sauce over here in Australia, which is what we call marinara sauce over in the States. So when someone's talking about Napolitana sauce, for some reason, my brain, like my American brain, just immediately jumps to Neapolitan ice cream, which you guys have here in Australia, like Napolitana and like, I know they're very, very similar, but for some reason, if somebody is talking about putting Napolitana sauce on pasta, my mind immediately jumps to Neapolitan ice cream. And it's so tough to wrap my head around sometimes. So this is one of those words I know it's going to take a little while for it to really sink in and get the difference. But Napolitana sauce over here in Australia is pretty much what we call marinara sauce over in the States. Now this one I had heard before because Mark and I used to bake a lot together when we were doing long distance, and that is bicarb soda over here in Australia. Bicarb is what we call baking soda over in the States. I've heard some people just call it Arm & Hammer. I don't know why. That's kind of odd. I know a lot of Americans will call certain things by brand names, like the whole Jello thing, but Arm & Hammer makes so much more than just baking soda, so calling that is a little bit odd to me. We just call it baking soda over in the States, and over here in Australia it is bicarb or bicarb soda. And the last one that has caught me up a little bit, and I think there's a little bit of a difference to these, is icing sugar. Icing sugar over here in Australia is what we call powdered sugar over in the States. And over here in Australia, they also have castor sugar, which is kind of like an in-between icing sugar and regular granulated white sugar. Castor sugar isn't something that we get over at the grocery stores in the States. We typically only have the options of powdered sugar or white granulated sugar. So if I need powdered sugar, I know that I need to grab icing sugar, and if there's a recipe talking about castor sugar, then I'm not going to be able to use white granulated sugar. I kind of had to grab white granulated sugar and grind it up when I was over in the States. So that's it for this video, you guys. These are some of the differences that I've seen over in the grocery stores when I'm grocery shopping. If there's any more that you guys can think of, let me know down below. If you know any other American and Australian food differences, I'd be happy to hear them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button down below to join our little Amer-Australian family. I post on Mondays and sometimes Thursdays about the differences between American and Australian cultures and the overall process of learning to live down under. My name is Kaitlyn. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!